Hi guys, it's Joey and this is my video for this week for YouTube Pagan Challenge. This week was about sacred texts, and at first I was like, oh dear, what am I going to do? Because I've already talked about sacred texts last week in the cultural influences and kind of had a little bit of a kind of rant, sort of, a little bit, not really, about, you know, people saying that if it's not in the text then it's not true, and me saying that, you know, texts are a great place to start from, they're kind of like a springboard. And I also talked about like the evolution of spirituality last week. So I kind of looked at this week's topic and I was like, I've kind of shot myself in the foot this week, what am I gonna do? And at one point I was like, maybe I'll just leave it this week. And then I actually watched Nadia's video, and Nadia from Lady Jane Spiritually, and I was like, you know, that's where we're going. I'm going to sort of VR this kind of to her video, because that's something that I have been experiencing in the last week and a half as well. And I think it's a very good point that I can kind of bring my own perspective to, which is the idea that just because something is older doesn't mean it is better. And I'm going to bring a kind of historical perspective to this. In history, as I've said before, historians are considered to be kind of investigators, and they take articles and written by different people. Sometimes they're a little bit more stark in fact, so they're just numbers and things, but generally speaking it's accounts written by human beings, and they basically investigate the past, if you like. They piece together these sources, these facts, because there's no such thing as a fact in history. You can argue with that, but generally speaking. And they basically create a narrative from these sources. And I think that's very much what happens when you are looking at a text just because it's older from history and saying that that's the pinnacle of truth in spirituality. And I've had experiences probably throughout my life, but this week especially, with the idea that just because something is old means therefore it's more truthful, and it's bumpkus as far as I'm concerned, because unfortunately this idea gets kind of carted out as a way to look down on other people, to try and, you know, belittle other people's beliefs or experiences or what other people are saying. It kind of gets brought in as like a judgment card, like, well, I've been doing this for X amount of years and you haven't. I think we've all heard that one. I've come from a direct hereditary line, and I've had witches in my family for 20 years. I can trace myself back to Salem. We've usually come across people like that. Oh well, my ancestors come from the motherland, that being Ireland, usually when I get attacked. So I know what I'm talking about, and you don't, because I have this ancestry to Ireland and you don't. Well, I have this grimoire that comes from 1806, and therefore my spells are better than yours, and my information is better than yours. And this stupid voice is because it's a load of bumpkus. It's basically a way of utilising something as being older and being synonymous with being truer, and it's nonsense. And usually when people are engaging in this sort of behaviour, it's because of a level of inadequacy somewhere within them, because they feel that they need to rely on things that are older to back up their story, and therefore if you actually sit and probably, you know, try and have an intellectual debate with these people, they probably swear at you and run in the opposite direction, because unless you're swallowing what they're feeding you, they don't want to know. And that's the experience that I've had 9 times out of 10 when these situations arise. There's nothing wrong with older texts. Similarly, there is nothing wrong with newer texts. I don't think that you can say there is more truth in something just because it's older. I don't think you can say there is more truth in something just because it's newer. I think that spirituality evolves. We are not medieval people. We are not medieval witches. Do you want to live without central heating and plumbing? Because I don't. I'm perfectly happy being able to have a shower in the morning and having a flushing toilet. It's great. So let's not pretend that we live in a world that we don't live in. So things that come from the past are based on the person's interpretation of the world around them. at that point. Here's a big secret. All books are written by human beings. And the light kind of went blue, like I was doing something creepy. Ooh. And because everything is written by human beings, that means we are reading the scope of a human being's experience. And I hate to break it to you people, but we as human beings, we are incredibly limited. We are limited beings. You know, I was listening to, oh gosh, what's his name? His name's gone, the comedian, who's actually really spiritual. I know who I mean, and someone will put the name down there, right, with the hair. You know who I mean. I can't believe that. Oh, this is what happens when you have to take a load of pills because you're recovering from surgery. Anyway, I was listening to him. I won't say Ridley, and his name is not Ridley at all, so no, it's gone. It's completely gone. Anyway, he was saying about how human beings are limited. We can't see, you know, atoms. We can't see the things that hold atoms together. So our sight is limited. We can't hear certain pitches. We can't see certain waves. So as a human being, on a physical level, we're completely and utterly limited. And we're limited not only by that, but by our experiences, by our personal histories, by our cultural associations, by how we perceive the world. And we perceive the world through our personal lens, which means judgments, biases, not necessarily bad, but, you know, you have them. And the experience that you experience something in is going to be completely different to how someone else experiences their spirituality. And this is true in history, and this is true in spiritual texts of an older generation. They were seeing the world through their lens. They were experiencing the situation through their lens, the way that life was back then. You can apply this to the Morrigan text by saying that we're going blue, because life was warlike. The one I always enjoy is the idea of cattle raiding, because in the ancient texts, you know, that's how Celts would get their prowess, get their honour. They'd go cattle raiding the neighbouring tribe. They would hurt each other. They would take their weapons. They'd go to war against their neighbours for cattle, because cattle are the status things. Can you imagine cattle being the status things in this modern day and age? Not really? No. And that's because in the Western society, at least, you know, I mean, we're not as warlike. You know, war isn't an everyday matter-of-fact day of life, and people use this to say, you can't follow the Morrigan, you can't, she's just a war goddess. And this is tying into this whole idea that, you know, gods don't change. And I think this ties into the idea of sacred texts having to be older, that older is better. And it's because people try and like box spirituality in and say that, you know, somehow we are lesser than our ancestors, and somehow our experiences are lesser than people in history. Now, if you put that in perspective in your own lifetime, that's like saying, well, your experiences when you were younger are more important than your experiences now. Because, you know, in points in time, if you go back in time to in your own lifetime, and that's nuts. Most of us were Fruit Loops when we were teenagers. We were going through all the puberty, you know? I would guess so. I guess we've all been stupid as teenagers, you know, to varying degrees. And that's the point with these texts, is that just because they come from the past doesn't make them any more spiritually relevant. If anything, it possibly makes them less spiritually relevant today, because they were written for people at a time when that was true, and the world around them was true, and the lessons reflected the world around them. Now, that's not to say there aren't truths that don't sort of cross over the boundaries of time and culture, because clearly there are. Clearly, certain things stay with us as a people, as a human race. Certain ideas stay with us, and it's only when I think religions cling mercilessly to outdated, outmoded thoughts and spiritual practices, that they begin to die. And this is why I think there is so much outroar in modern society around the idea of religious texts promoting bigotry, promoting racism, promoting sexism, promoting homophobia. One of my earliest arguments about spirituality was with a Christian man who said that homosexuality was unnatural, as it's said in his sacred text. And I said, well, if it's unnatural, it wouldn't be found in nature. And you can find it in nature, as it happens, all over the place, rampant in nature. And the example I gave was pigeons, because you can get gay sexuality in pigeons in nature. Therefore, it's occurring in nature. Therefore, it isn't natural. Therefore, I disagree with your sacred text. And just because it's X amount of years old on this subject matter doesn't mean it's right. I think where sacred texts are concerned, firstly, we have to take a humanitarian perspective. Are these sacred texts telling us to do things which are against the highest goals of humanity, the highest goals of spirituality for that matter? Are they telling us to harm? Are they telling us to judge? Are they telling us to segregate? Because if they are, then they're outmoded and they need to be scrapped. They don't belong in modern spirituality. Some people will cling to the past like it's some kind of guideline, and this is why I, for one, and I'm sure many other pagans, get involved in paganism, because there isn't this strict guideline, because it is a path of evolution and personal interpretation. And then unfortunately some people try to bring in these segregating ideas that then kind of trying to bind paganism, witchcraft, spirituality, whatever you want to classify, because I don't want to box, but you know, it's easier for talking purposes. And they bring in these outmoded ideas to try and then give it these kind of outmoded structures. And one of these outmoded structures is that just because something is older, it's better. The way that one person interprets a situation and then writes it down. And what if they write it down wrong? What if the translation is wrong? What if it was written in ancient Arabic and someone translated it and one word was slightly off and that translation changed the whole context of the text? And then 50 years later that someone realizes this is a misinterpretation, or certain elements of ancient texts are missing, and then they get found and then they change everything. They change the dialogue. Clinging to outmoded ideas. Use a little bit of common sense. I love the quote, I love storms, every bit of civilization gone, and talking about primordiality. That's from Penny Dreadful. That's from a modern TV show. Just because something is modern doesn't mean it has no truth in it. And I think that's what we really need to look at. We really need to look at where the truth is versus where the kind of egotistical need to be better and manipulate is in a situation. And this is what I have seen this week. The idea that, well, this magical item is old, therefore my truth is the real truth. And you believe me because these are older. Saying a magical tool comes from 3 generations, saying it comes from your ancestor who was a witch, saying, you know, whatever, just to manipulate your own truth into something. Low. It's low behaviour. And I've been discussing kind of fear, I've been discussing the kind of manipulation of fear, and this is another method that gets utilised to make people afraid that they're doing their spirituality wrong, to be afraid of the answers that they might seek and find for themselves, to be too afraid of living their life, living their spirituality, that they need to cling to outdated, outmoded forms, because humans don't want to be wrong. And that's our first mistake. That's the first thing we do wrong, is think that being wrong is wrong. Being wrong is only wrong if you live there. when we get things wrong, we go, oh, we screwed it up. That was wrong. That no longer applies. I'm going to grow. I'm going to change. I'm going to work at it. That's spirituality. That's spiritual truth. That's going inward, finding what is right for you, not for anyone else, not for the person coming in and telling you, well, this ancient book is 600 years old and it tells you to do the spirituality in this way. This magical wand is inherited from 10 generations of my family and therefore my magic is stronger than yours. These tarot cards come from somewhere 8 million years in the past, therefore my truth that I want you to believe so I can manipulate you is the right one. Really? See past it. See past ego. See past bumpkiss. See past this kind of need to judge, this need to belittle, this need to shelter you from what is true, like you can't handle it. You can handle that truth. Take it, wrestle it, use your brain, chew it up, spit it out, look at it, feel it. Doesn't have to be in a book, it has to be in here, in your heart, in your soul. I'm a fan of books, don't get me wrong, I mean, you know, I'm a book lover, I'm a bookworm. I enjoy the written word, I think it's incredible, I think there's something special, beautiful, and I love books to death. But, huge but, the idea of letting it rule over your spirituality just because you think older is better is, for the last time in this video because I'm enjoying this word, bumpkiss. Right, I'm done. I'm done. Ranty rant. Owie ow ow. So, that was this week's YouTube Pagan Challenge. Many blessings.